Welcome to Anchoring the Consciousness of Oneness World Summit. We are very fortunate today to have Ram Tiwari with us from Nepal. Ram is the founder chair of Nepal Forum for Restorative Justice. A lawyer by academic and professional backgrounds, he's been working in the fields of peace building, dialogue, and restorative justice in Nepal for more than 13 years. Apart from serving as a member of a task force to prepare Nepal's first national restorative justice curriculum, he's been involved in introducing and establishing restorative justice in judicial and community contexts. In the field of restorative justice, he served as a member of the expert committee in reviewing the UN Handbook on Restorative Justice Programs, a member of the Restorative Justice Working Group at the Office of Justice Programs at the Department of Justice in the United States. And recently, he's been serving as an international expert on restorative and transitional justice for the United Nations Office in Somalia. So thank you so much, Ram, for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you, Sarah. The honor is totally mine, I would say, and it's always been pleasure to connect with you and engage in discussions that go deep, that go wide, and that go long. So thank you so much for having me here.
Yes. Oh, it is my pleasure. And I know that you're traveling and in remote area right now in Nepal, and so making this happen wasn't an easy thing to do. So I really appreciate that. But a lot has happened in your world since we last spoke for the summit back in 2018. So can you tell me a little bit about what's happened in the last couple of years?
Well, I would say one word that would sum this up would be we have started becoming more intentional about what we're doing, and I would say we are finding more purposes as we are working along. So, in practical terms, I was able to serve in some like formal committees that were able to produce some laws and policies here in Nepal and abroad. But with that, we were able to work with other organizations here in Nepal and also in the region on launching justice-centered programs that included restorative justice as a value, but it was very much aligned with the ideas of like oneness or the ideas of human justice, and justice that is more connecting than dividing. So that kind of work. So I have been involved with this organization called Nepal Forum for Restorative Justice. We started as an institute, but we thought that we want to make it less institutionalized, even by the name. So we changed the name to Nepal Forum, to suggest that it's a forum for everybody who wants to contribute or be involved in the movement. Apart from that, we have regional forums called South Asia Forum and the Asia Pacific Forum. I've been able to work with both of them. Of the South Asia Forum, I'm one of the founding chairs. So I'm very happy to take this regional worldview, I would say. But apart from that, we have also been able to find something in concrete terms, like introduce some laws or policies in Nepal that included the word restorative justice and the justice that was more connecting the dividing. Yes, and apart from that is everything that you read in the bio. So working with the United Nations Office in reviewing the 2020 handbook. So that was a great opportunity because it had it gave us that chance to insert our ideas, even bringing this context into the global movement, and working with the UN office now in Somalia has also expanded my I would say experiences, and I'm also grateful for all these opportunities. But apart from that, I would say all of this is actually funneling towards making us more intentional in what we're doing. So yeah,
Yeah, that's that is a lot going on. And so, and having all these experiences, and you know, and working in the handbook, and then working with the United States and working with Somalia, and how would you say? Uh, I don't know. I guess that they're all of these different projects are kind of enriching each other on some level, and um, so, from the cultural perspective, do you see that certain uh, ideals are taken from one culture and adopted into another through the restorative justice movement?
I think yes, and although all these big names are like names, but our work is mostly grounded here in Nepal. We work deep down in communities. We actually go and do the what they call the dirty work, like really working on the ground, trying to galvanize the movement as much as we can. So whatever I found, working at the community levels to other levels is the idea of oneness, especially the idea of the connectedness, the human need to be connected, um, then separated. Restorative justice is the term that is given to that whole movement. It's a name given to that, but the underlying value is the idea of connectedness or oneness in some ways, or the need to be together, or the togetherness of human being, the being idea. That is what I've found, and therefore not everything can be transplanted from one context to another, but there are certain elements that are common. So one thing that I found um, very much common, or very much spreading across our cultures or context, is the idea of emotion. The emotionalities. Um, we find that we don't understand the languages that other people speak, but we understand the emotions. We
Yeah.
understand when they're hurt. We understand when they're happy and glad, and even if we don't understand a word, we can be happy with them when they're happy. We can read their eyes. We feel sad. Our hearts broke when they're broken. So it does not need the language, the technical language, but the language of connection, the language of emotions. That's what we can read, and that's what actually connects us more than anything else.
Wow. That's
And also, I think the reason that we work deep down in communities, helps us see things from bottom up. What actually lives in community in remote corners. Um, that gives us a very grounded idea of what people expect, how they live by. They don't live by buzzwords, they don't live by jargons, they don't live by these big names called restoratives. They live with some basic needs, basic emotions, and if we can meet those, if we can connect with those, I think that's the human connection, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you're working with all of these different people on these teams as a member of committees and things, and talking about theory and what restorative justice means, and looking for the right words and things like that. And, while language is important, we do have to develop new language to be in the space of oneness. But also being on the ground level and really seeing how this theory translates into action, and what works and what doesn't. That is not something that most people have the opportunity to do, both of those things, and see. So that's really phenomenal that this can happen, and you're seeing it right there. And I'm thinking about the United States, and how individualistic the culture is versus collectivistic nature of the culture, maybe in Nepal, and the differences
Mhm.
in that. Um, and and so it's like, when I'm imagining what it is that you're doing, I'm sort of imagining like the beauty of the collectivistic culture in Nepal, kind of like um, kind of like seeping into the United States a bit, and that kind of warms my heart to think that that's a possibility, and how could it not be, with you being on these committees and things? So
Well, yes. But over the years, I've realized that this was something that also was taught to us. The idea that the West versus the East, individualistic versus collectivistic, and but I have gradually realized that that the dichotomy is not as rigid, as watertight. These are not very watertight ideas. These are not something that we can really say black and white. I have found in the US very many people who have showered me with love and care and inspiration, all that. I've lived with many families there for months. I've been bestowed with everything that they had. So over these years, whatever the the communities, the people, the family members in the US have offered, the friends circles have offered, I have stopped believing that dichotomy actually. But but there is a distinct unity, a distinct identity in the way these cultures work. um, and So these are just different cultures, I would say, right? And in the urban centers in Nepal, um, it's a very different culture that we're gradually seeing evolving. Uh, Whereas if you go to remote village like here, um, it's a very different setup. Maybe it's conditioned by certain other things. Then the essence of our being, the Nepaliness, or people living in the East. That might be one, but there is also a large amount of this collectivistic culture in the US, I think. And I've also realized that some connections that I made in the US, in the West, or in the West, have been very, very strong and been very, very genuine. They've lasted for like years. Our conversations have been very deep uh, and very meaningful. Um, and maybe I have not found something of that type here or in India, or in the region.
Yeah.
So it's maybe
There's,
it's more than that dichotomy. Maybe I'm saying.
yeah, I mean, and that makes so much sense because that's what this work does. It breaks
Yes,
down the
exactly.
system that we exist in, and we gets to the heart of the person, each other, our recognition, of our shared humanity. And then there are, while there are still some differences, we see so many
Mm-hmm.
similarities, right? And
Totally.
our humanness is to care about one another. And so no system can really make that go away. It's only when we follow those systems and not, uh, at the expense of each other, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, really, this work is kind of peeling the layers back of all the things that, that we hold on to that don't really matter in the larger context, and really and brings people together so they can recognize their oneness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think yes. And only this afternoon we had a discussion um, on developing one encyclopedia for all these initiatives that are happening.
Wow.
And um, a very leading scholar on restorative justice, you know, offered me this opportunity to lead this Asia project, and just finding out what's happening and trying to connect, trying to find similarities, and actually finding the oneness in all of our works. So yeah, as we work, I think the circle of oneness will widen, um, and we'll find more things that connect than divide us. It's it's until we spot those that we find that we're different, and but one day I think we'll find I think a lot of similarities with us than other ways. Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. In 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 this work, when you are on the ground level, and really and working with people and trying to figure out what the need is, and how to help them come together. What have been your challenges in that? Um, I mean, and are you doing this work on the ground level anywhere else outside of Nepal?
On challenges, I believe one is the time that it takes. It takes a lot of patience, perseverance. It makes us wait a lot to see any change happen. Sometimes change is not an overnight enterprise. It doesn't happen that way. But the way we are told to work sometimes requires that we have to produce some change. We have to effect some change to show that we are working, and this is why your support matters a lot. That is expectation out there from our supporters, from our well-wishers. On the ground, changes don't happen that easily, because it's changing people's hearts, people's way of thinking, the mindscapes, right? The way people, or the heartscapes, the way people think, the way people relate to one another. It takes a lot of time, but once that's changed, that's very sustainable, that we know. So changing one heart at a time, one relation at a time, takes a while. So this is something that we've not been able to produce something satisfactory to people who support us. Like, see, these are the numbers that we've changed over 2 years. We can't say that way. These are the numbers that we received because of your support, right? This is what we can say. We can say that we've changed some hearts, we've changed some trainings. Maybe we're trying to make some change in this community in 10 years. That's what we can say. So it takes a lot of time, and our inability to sometimes scale this work is also one of the challenges. We're learning how we can scale this up. We are also trying to learn how we can make it sustainable. By that, what we mean is how we can build on this energy, the energy of self-awakening, the energy of community oneness intact, so that we become irrelevant. That's our goal. Our goal is that we become irrelevant. Our goal is that we just become invisible in communities, right? We just are not needed anymore. That's our goal. We don't want to make ourselves relevant, because that is not how a community would work. This is one of the challenges. Resources, finding resources, mobilizing them is a challenge. We're learning with that. And I think it's also good to learn from other experiences, like what's happening in other corners of the world, or in other kinds of communities or contexts. That's what we are trying to gain, that worldview, that insight. And to gain this understanding, I've had some chances to travel to some places. I've done some traveling in South Asia for training and some community work. So that's outside Nepal. Outside of this region, well, I've not been engaged in a field level work. But I'm hoping that starting next year, when we are working on this project of developing an Asian framework for restorative justice, or Asian encyclopedia on restorative justice, I think I'll have more opportunities to see how things are working on ground. Of now, yeah, some countries.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I like to hit it home with my students, and I mean, because I'm teaching a small group of students this right now, and it's like the mindset shift that happens, or the mindscape, that shift that you talk about. It takes time, like you said, and what we like to do is we like to have a quick fix, and that's where the fallback comes into, like, falling back on the rules, falling back on the quantitative research, and that sort of thing. And really, it's in the qualitative research where you see the difference, right? And having that uh, record of the interaction that has now changed. Um, but yeah, it's not a band-aid fix. It does take time, and uh, I think the desire, and I see it in the United States, is the desire for a quick fix right now, make the rule, get things done. And in the human heart and the human condition, we're really not wired to operate in that manner. And so change is slow in that regard. And
Mhm.
I can understand.
Yes, and yes,
Mhm.
and I always remember this in this simple logic, that these communities, these relations that we see, the value systems that we see here, um, that we see one change, are a product of century world uh, processes, right? These evolve over centuries. Now, the communities that we see, the problems that we see are a result of so many factors for so many centuries, and therefore trying to overall things overnight, it's just going to unsettle, I would say. So we need something that does not crumble the community, but that will gradually mold it towards better. So that balance between the evolution and revolution, I think that's or the internal and external. Um, that's what concerns us most, I would say. Um, and if we try to, I've seen that when we try to find like quick fixes, um, they produce sometimes quick results, but they don't last long. Um, so for when we talk of sustainability, when we talk of sustainable communities, it brings us this idea of something that lasts longer. And if we are just um, unboxing them and leaving it as they are, that might produce more harm than good, I would say. And that is also, I would say, the logic behind bottom-up approaches versus top-down approaches of change. Um, when we want to involve community a lot, build on their strength than their weaknesses, that's how we achieve communities buy-in. That's how we gain community support. That's how community feels that it's their own work, it's their own concern, it's something that is theirs, rather than saying this is an idea that we need, that I know, and that you need to get fixed from something that I know. That is a very hierarchical model of working, right?
Yeah,
That's very much about I'm expert and you are a lay person, or you are a lay community. That's a very non-hierarchical, non-oneness idea, I would say.
yeah,
Uh, but like you're saying, it doesn't change overnight, and therefore we might like to learn and exchange, um, and do what we can from whatever we have. We might not produce massive changes. We might not change the whole world for everybody, but we might change the whole world for somebody, for one person. Our work sometimes can change the whole world for one person or two persons.
yeah, yeah,
That's what we're aiming for.
yeah. And that's really it. It's a beautiful thing when, if you can reach one person, you know, you've reached so many, because that person's going to touch so many lives. And so yes, it does happen very slow. And thinking about um, you know, the you being with the people in the membership of the UN and talking about this in, and developing theory and developing language around, how to talk, just even how to talk about this, because we're not really used to having discussions that are non-hierarchical or non punitive, really. And so with all of that, and then having to take that information and um, and translate that to other you're working in a lot of different areas. Is is that kind of an overarching uh, ideal, this work that you're doing with the UN, um, or is it different from culture to culture?
I think the nut bolts, I think they're similar. I would say, like they talk of universal needs, our feelings, our thoughts. They're found in many cultures, but the way we express them, the way we use languages for them, that might differ, or the way we use our means to achieve those needs, those might different. Um, but when we speak the language of needs, I think that's what all of us have in common.
Yeah, it's universal.
And sometimes it's also about developing cultures, intentional cultures, I would say, cultivating that bottom up, and that is one of the reasons why we also started from this year a restorative justice school project. So by that, what we're trying to do is we have a school which has for some time strived to offer something new for students and the community in general, but we didn't have the language of that new thing that we would do. So from November, we'll also make it very public, but we have decided to develop a real framework of transforming that school to a restorative school. We call it restorative practices school. So the school that has the that has um, the culture of care, that has the culture of accountability. When something goes wrong, how we make sure that the whole school community gets affected, right? And we punish somebody, and we also know that the whole school gets punished if we punish one person. That idea of connectedness, and how do we take accountability when something goes wrong, or how do we help one another when we have to do something for the whole community or for each other. That kind of the humanness, the sociability, I think that is something we can develop intentionally, I would say. That is something we can start cultivating. We might not just wait for that to emerge naturally. um, and we just try to see how things go, and say it's a very learning initiative, but we're hopeful that it will be able to create some ripples for other communities. It will create that enabling environment for students to come and learn, and they develop as like uh, true full human beings, I would say, like full potentials. Nothing is challenged, nothing is uh, contained. So that is the kind of ideal we're thinking of with this school project. Let's see, in some years we'll see how far we can go. Yeah, so working in wherever spaces are available, that's been our model, that's been our way, I would say.
Yeah, that's really incredible. Being able to work with children to create a cultural initiative is powerful, because children are sponges. They absorb everything, don't they? And they learn this process really quickly. They need
Mm-hmm.
one time, one circle, and then they know what to do. They know when to come back to the circle. They know who they need there. They know how to have conversations with adults differently. Um, and it's a beautiful thing. And then in thinking about training the adults to support the children in this way after the adults have been sort of conditioned in a punitive way, it's it's an
Mm-hmm.
interesting dynamic because
Yes.
the people the adults can try, and sometimes so there has to be some sort of like checks and balances in some way, right? For like an I don't know, just an objective perspective because I mean, I'm thinking about right now, I'm thinking about our mutual friend Sylvia and going into a school in Richmond, Virginia, in the United States. And um, there was a circle process that occurred, and two boys who were fighting made an agreement they were going to get along and they were going to play together in gym class and choose each other to be on the same teams and things. And the teachers were notified that that happened. And then the gym teachers became sort of policing them to make sure that they were doing what they said they were going to do, which is so opposite of what this is even about. And they think they're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in training the adults to show up for the kids in a unitive way, or a way that supports oneness. I think we it's possible that we're going to fail at some point because of just our conditioning, right? So, have you thought about that at all? And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of one very um, inspiring figure in the field who once said that in most of the trainings that they do, when it comes to restorative justice, if it's a 9-day training, we spend 8 days to make people unlearn what they've learned over years. It's so much of unlearning than learning, because we've been conditioned to this way of thinking, this way of acting, that it's very difficult to let go of that. Use it any name, but it's very difficult to get rid of that mindset, right? And we didn't blame them also, because it's an accumulation over many years and many decades. So yeah, a lot of unlearning has to happen, a lot of rather than learning. So when we unlearn, we just fit as we are, to interact naturally, to connect naturally. So things, most of our learnings, most of our education systems, unfortunately also in Nepal, have been westernized. We always look to the West for models, and sometimes we just forget our roots. Sometimes we forget the way that actually works in our context. Sometimes we forget whether the copied Western model actually works, or does it not work to what we want to achieve, and all that. So with this, I think we'll be able to get back to our roots, hopefully, and maybe inspire some other communities to do the same, or look back inwards, look into ourselves sometimes, look into our culture sometimes. um, let's see how far we can go. And something that we've also realized is, education is not only about children, it's a lot more. So when we punish children, or when we have this punitive education for children, that goes back to their homes, to their families, to their relatives, that multiplies um, into many numbers. So it's not just about children. And if we do the reverse, when we start caring children, when we start discussing the language of care, the communities of care, that again develops the communities of families, the community of, that kind of community among relatives, and the whole, the community of care will evolve. That has ripples in both ends. So it's not just children, it's not teacher and children, it's about a big important work that we're doing, that goes across spaces also, right? From one space, school to family to relatives to community. And sometimes it also has this temporal, the time aspect, like when we spend some time teaching kids these languages, these practices, this is also going to benefit in the long run the whole community, the wherever they go, the future. It's cultivating that future. It's not just the present that we're trying to speak of, that we're trying to discuss. It's also dealing with the future, dialoguing with the future. It's not the present, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very exciting. And just seeing how, I mean, well, and the children grow up and become adults, and then they do what they've absorbed as before they could really analyze. So that is a beautiful thing. And I love the work. I'm very excited for the work that you're doing in creating this school of restorative practices. There was a time when you were practicing law, and and before you started doing all of this work. um, can you talk a little bit about what you experienced as an attorney, and why you chose uh, to pick up this important work?
um, one prominent learning from my law school was that it talks about law, not justice. That's what I learned. It's so much about language. It's so much about the surface, the terminologies, the books, the black letters, that as they call it. And if you read newspapers, if you work in communities, if you meet people, outside courts, we find a lot of frustration among people at both ends. I would say, people who we supposedly represent feel marginalized, they feel not included, and people who say they won the case also feel that they were not very happy with the outcomes. So it was a point. There was a point where we will start asking questions on what is it serving for, and it looks like it's only serving for professionals who are making this whole business, right? So some are working as lawyers, some are working as a government attorneys, some are working at court professionals or judges and so on. So for professionals it looks very good because it gives us money and all that, but for people who actually impacted or involved, that's where the dissatisfaction comes from. And that is what we saw in Nepal. So we were I was looking for some alternatives. If there's a better way we can apply law, if there's a better way we can get deeper, dive deeper from surface. If there is any way we can think about justice, not about just law. And that was my experience, where it was very marginalizing. It was very isolating. It was not connecting. When we used to hear a lot, these funny phrases saying, judges in the courtrooms quarrel more than the disputing parties in the neighborhoods. So we were sometimes over exaggerating facts because that's how we made money. And it was so antithetical to our human existence, actually, to our human work, to our human being. Our being didn't allow that kind of exaggeration. It didn't allow that kind of mechanization, using a very technical language and all that, which people don't understand. We were not so much used to using these disconnecting languages. And very soon I found this, as I was searching, I found this idea of restorative justice. And immediately, the moment epiphany, this is what I was looking for these old years. And, from that day onwards, I found every day more energized, more purposeful, and more directional. I find that since that day. But before that, it was such a professional work. It was not about who actually owned that case, that conflict, that crime, right?
Yeah.
Who the real stakeholders were at the margins. The professionals were at the center. It was so much. It was so not natural, I would say. Um,
Yeah. The court's stealing essentially the
yeah,
conflict from the people. And then that's perpetual victimhood. When your conflicts, when you can't own your own conflict, that's there's no power in that. Um, yeah.
and
And
I
so
think and I think the work that we do in communities, or the work we do with the real stakeholders, we find that purpose back, meaning that they feel that they've been included. They feel that they've been heard for the first time in their life. Sometimes, somebody giving them that space to say something, then telling them to do something, right? That is what we find in this work, and that is what is utterly satisfying. Because now we just want to be invisible gradually. We just want to bring this discourse and practice of bringing stakeholders at the center, and that's our goal. And it looked so much it looks so much natural now. It looks so much genuine when we're working. It doesn't add any makeups. It's just as natural as it can be. But when if I can tell you this story about when we started training lawyers and judges about restorative justice, and this idea of reimagining justice, we used to get a lot of resistance, and we understood why later. Because it was a lot about challenging, or uprooting the professions, right? um, but for communities, it was about their stories. It was about their conflicts. It was about their harms. It was about their need that we were discussing. So it was immediately connecting, and it was not threatening for anybody of us when we were discussing this idea of restorative justice. It felt very natural, very familiar for all of us. For professionals, it felt very threatening. It felt very uprooting. It felt very disconnecting. So we did spend some resources in training lawyers and professionals, but the return that we have received from communities, that is what's inspiring us.
yeah, that's beautiful. I remember some time ago we were talking about the justice system in Nepal and the justice versus or in relationship to the justice system in the United States, and how it's similar because it's kind of mirroring, but
Mhm.
the US justice system is so old that, and it's so ingrained in everything that we are as a culture in the United States, that it's going to take a lot longer to see some change and do something different. And you know but in Nepal, because it hasn't been as long, right? So I'm wondering, and I know it's only been probably 3 years since we had that conversation, but I'm wondering, um, are you seeing the changes occurring, and do you see, like, in 20 years? I know you said it had only been, a few decades or something that the justice system had been implemented, and then
Mhm.
we're now seeing children go to prison and things like that, or jail. And so, yeah, I'm just curious to know what you think about that.
Yes, that's so true. It's very easy for us to roll back to our roots, because the idea of modern justice system is very new, and it's still very fresh and alienating at the same time. So we already know the disadvantages, and we can get back to our roots. We can find more community based, more community driven models, and therefore more sustainable models. I think that's going to be like that in some decades, hopefully in our lives, that will roll back, that we will build more human justice systems. And for that to happen, we don't need to go anywhere. We just can go inwards, to like inside ourselves, inside our communities, and into our roots. And this has also been documented in different reports by different government and non-government agencies. We find a lot of dissatisfaction reported, like there are big numbers of people who feel that they've been victimized by the justice system, who supposedly represent them and deliver them, offer them justice. There is a great question about accountability. Say, for example, people who had harmed, do they get connected with this harmed party? Do they get connected with the community? And that connection hasn't happened, right? So what we're ending up with is a fragmented community, is a fragmented system, and that has started becoming apparent. It's occurring to many of us that things are not working. So this is the moment, I think, where we can start discussing, if this is not occurring, maybe this is something that we can work. This is something that actually has that promise, and that is also our, for us, that is also our strength, because we've been able to build on the community's own strength, right, or their own power of getting back to roots, or their own power of solving these issues, conflicts or crimes and so on. And also, getting back to our power of having this having this idea of oneness, having this idea of community being intact, then dispersed, then unsettled.
Yeah. It's just it is so much to think about, for the system that we exist in, and collectively across, all over the world. We are in need of the connectedness, and we will, all of us, we have to do the work, right? So that's going within, like you were talking about, going inward into ourselves, going inward into our communities, and recognizing our connectedness. And so many people are struggling with that. But I mean, even with the pandemic, and even in the United States, what's going on, in politics and things like that, and then the social injustice here, and I mean, in all parts of the world, it can feel, very, like you're just powerless to it, right?
Mm-hmm,
And then,
mm-hmm,
the fear starts to come up, which is one of the reasons why I'm
mm-hmm,
doing the summit in the first place, is to help really
mm-hmm,
give people an opportunity to learn some tools, or to develop a new understanding, that they're not alone. The rate, the I think that, like, more people than ever in the world feel lonely than they ever have before. And I believe that that has everything to do with the way that we resolve our problems, and our conflicts. And I don't know what I just, there's so many complexities right now.
mm-hmm.
They're weaved throughout societies, throughout cultures. What would you say to people who are looking, to find that connectedness, and really celebrate the concept of oneness? Um, but they don't really know where to start. What would you say to those viewers?
um Perhaps, for us, maybe to understand why that hasn't happened, why some people are not ready to listen to other stories. The readiness is something that that isn't happening, and that makes us very anxious about our work. So say, for example, when we say, for this to happen, why didn't you go for restorative justice circles? Or why didn't you go for circles? Sometimes people aren't ready to go for circles, but sometimes people are not ready to listen to other stories, right?
Right.
So then the onus, the responsibility maybe onto us, like people like us who try to build bridges, try to create a space where they can be heard, where they can feel safe, and they can then be ready to exchange stories or exchange their version of their world. I have started believing that everybody has stories, many layers of stories that remain untold, and we are primarily storytellers. We get very easily connected when we know people's stories. Say if I know um, somebody that has a deeper story, I easily get connected with that person. But what I see from the surface at the exterior, that is disconnecting, because we differ by appearance, we differ by skin color, we differ by language, we differ by backgrounds, we differ by passports, right? We differ by all these externalities. But as soon as I start hearing any deeper story, any story that is beneath that first surface, that is immediately connecting. That is very immediately connecting. So the challenge is then how do we create that connecting spaces? The models of restorative justice or unity justice are many other circles. There are many other peace building programs happening across the world, have rich potentials of transforming this. The challenge is all of us to create this synergy, and finding some time to listen to all these stories before we bring all them together, before we make them ready. Sometimes we can say that you have to get ready to listen to these stories. That doesn't happen that way. Again, it's so antithetical again. So there is a hope. I would always say that there is a hope. There is a story that people live by. We are primary storytellers, and sometimes we judge very, very easily, because judging judging is easy, thinking is different, it's difficult. So we do the easy thing, we just judge. So we, in a context, we say pause before judge.
Yeah.
That's how we say here.
Oh,
So if we can afford to pause before we judge somebody, that creates another layer within us, the buffer within us before we confront others, before we hate others. That creates that. Um, yeah. So the work could be more on people like us, people who are in the field, like having hopes in our work, creating more connections than divides, being grateful for each other's contributions, and thinking that we are towards the same cause. I think that'll make a big change, than the other ways.
yeah.
Um,
Across the globe, we all want the same thing. Yeah, I love the work you're doing is so wonderful. I'm very excited for what is happening right now in your world and the school in Nepal. Thank you so much for being true to your purpose, because the world really needs you, and I appreciate you so much.
thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for being here. And and I will hopefully see you sometime soon. It's just been a pleasure to reconnect with you, Ram. I'm just really happy to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah, and I'm very grateful to you and Sylvia, the unity justice work that she does and you do, and also this work of being very intentional about oneness. I think this is massively important for us, for all of us at the moment. So keep inspiring us, and we look forward to connecting for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much. Thank you
being
so
here.
much. Thank you again.
Bye.